Welcome to EdLeader with your host, Dr. Rob Jackson. Join Dr. Jackson for conversations and reflections on improving educational leadership from the classroom to the boardroom and beyond. Educational leadership is an ever-evolving opportunity to make a real and lasting difference in the lives of students, parents, and the community. And now, here's your host, Dr. Rob Jackson.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the latest weekly episode of the EdLeader podcast. I'm your host, Rob Jackson, and I want to thank you for spending time with me today. This week, I was notified by Buzzsprout, the podcast hosting service, that EdLeader has been downloaded 4,000 times so far this year. That is amazing, and it's thanks to you, the EdLeader community. Thank you for making the EdLeader podcast a part of your personal professional development. A special thanks to all of our guests as well. Speaking of guests, I have an extremely special guest today. Let's get to it. Today's guest is the founder and chairman of the International Center for Leadership in Education. He's recognized worldwide for his proven ability to move pre-K through 12th grade education systems towards more rigorous and relevant skills and knowledge for all students. For 25 years, he's crisscrossed our nation as well as the industrialized world to lead school reform efforts to effectively prepare students for their future. While an avid supporter of public education, he also challenges all of us to be more focused on our children's future than on maintaining the schools of our youth. His insights and leadership has caused nearly every major education association in the country, hundreds of school districts, numerous political and business leaders, publishers, and others to seek out his advice and guidance. Before founding and now serving as the chairman of the International Center for Leadership in Education, he was a teacher, local administrator, and a director with the New York State Education Department. He's the creator of the Rigor Relevance Framework, which has recently become the cornerstone of much of the nation's school reform efforts. He's also the author of numerous books about learning and education, textbooks, research reports, and journal articles. He's been recognized as a distinguished alumnus by both Temple University and the State University at Albany. Please help me welcome to the EdLeader podcast our special guest, one of the true educational heroes in our country, Dr. Bill Daggett.
Dr. Daggett, thank you so much for spending time with me. It is an incredible honor to have you on the podcast, to be able to have a conversation with you. I am a huge fan. You are one of my educational heroes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rob. Glad to be here. And thank you for doing this podcast for educators around the country.
I appreciate that. And thank you, buddy. It has been an exciting adventure for me to have the opportunity to share this podcast and to receive the feedback back that comes from the conversations I've been able to have with incredible educational leaders like you. Dr. Daggett, I have heard you speak many times, and I walk away from every opportunity to listen to you, one, with a lot of notes, by the way, but two, just absolutely fired up about the importance of the work we do every single day and about what the future will look like for each of us and for our children and grandchildren. You, sir, were the first futurist, if I may use that term, that I encountered. And as I've reflected back on things you said a few years back, they've absolutely come to fruition. How did you get interested in really what the future looks like and the research you do around the looking forward and helping us plan for that? What kind of drew your interest in that area?
Well, before you and most of your listeners were even thinking about becoming educators, you were probably in preschool or not even born yet. There was a national report called The Nation at Risk.
Yes, sir.
And I was a senior state official in New York State Education Department at the time. And the commissioner assigned me the lead role for The Nation at Risk for New York State. And I connected up with people like Alvin Toffler and others back then to try to lay out a blueprint for the state of New York. What do we need to do in this changing world? And I became fascinated by the work, have a lot of battle scars because of it, because I took on a lot of sacred cows along the way, by way of example. Back then, we had industrial arts for boys and boys only, home economics for girls and girls only. And we were the first state in the country, and I took the lead to transition from industrial arts to technology education for all students, and from home economics to home and career skills for all students.
Oh.
And it caused problems with teacher certification and therefore tenure and all kinds of issues. And we had lots and lots of battles. So it was really the nation at risk that got me underway. Because of the changes we were making, it gained a lot of national attention from the other state superintendents and state commissioners, which kind of put me on the national circuit to talk about what we were doing. And after a couple of years of that, I made the decision to leave and do this full time rather than being a deputy commissioner of education. And learned, Rob, an important lesson. Well, I'm a great advocate for change. And I think 2020, more than any time in my career, we need change. But I've also learned that revolutionists get killed.
Right.
You got to make it evolutionary. You got to begin with creating a culture. If you can create the culture that people are more future focused than forward focused, just trying to improve on what we did last year, rather put a stake in the ground 3 years out and build back from the future. You can create that culture, then you can make real change.
Absolutely. There's so much power in what you said. And first of all, let me commend the work around that gender equality, gender equity work that you were doing very early on. It's easy to take some things for granted, like a young man can take a home economics course or a young lady can take a welding course. And that wasn't always the case. And someone had to fight that fight and bear those battle scars. And I appreciate you and those you worked with for doing that work. Certainly, as you're well aware, we still have much work to do in that area and around equity and equality throughout our school systems. You mentioned a couple of things I'd like to unpack. One of those, and I certainly want to get to 2020 when I have the opportunity to talk to you, but one of the things that you mentioned was how everything is so intertwined in educational leadership and how we can get hung up on things like licensure when we're trying to do the right thing for boys and girls being able to access courses. And so I wonder what have you learned along the way in terms of a ed leader who wants to try to affect change and still survive affecting that change and not get tripped up because of some policy or procedure and really wind up with perhaps on the far outside their career in jeopardy because they went around trying to make that change in the wrong way. What wisdom do you have to share with us, Dr. Daggett?
Yeah, Rob, beyond the one I mentioned about try to create a culture that's future focused, let me go to organizational structure if you're a superintendent. Try to take your senior staff and don't put them in silos and give them responsibility for areas that appear at first not to be consistent with each other. Because when you do that, they'll begin to break down the barriers and begin to understand that, you know what I'm doing with busing has a lot to do with curriculum.
That's right.
And so, make the chief academic officer responsibility and the chief operating officer's responsibility, begin to intertwine them more. And they'll figure it out for you. And that's part of building that culture.
Right.
Also put people in those positions who are better at process than necessarily a content or a program specialist, because the content or program specialists are going to drill you deeper into the rat hole because that's what they know. You want people who can cut across the system, not deep. Because if you think what you want for your own children, your own grandchildren, you begin to think about, well, I want them to be independent as an adult. Well, what do I need to do to be independent as an adult? And you stop thinking about, well, they need a certain score in math or science or language arts. And I actually think, Rob, the pandemic has helped us, given us an opportunity.
Yes.
When the pandemic hit, one of the fundamental shifts that happened in all 16,000 school districts in this country suddenly academics took a second seat to health and safety.
That's right.
And in effect, we made this pivot to the whole child and became much more student-centric than content-centric.
Absolutely.
And I think if we use that as the example and focus on the kids, and you begin to see you can't compartmentalize everything, it's a compartmentalization. And we as senior school officials are responsible for creating the structure that either reinforces that compartmentalization or breaks those barriers down.
I think you're exactly right. And Dr. Daggett, to your point, one, I think, great example of that is you mentioned transportation, school buses. School buses were designed to transport children, and there's lots of regulations and inspections around the transportation department and how we use buses and what buses can be used for in terms of fuel and fuel efficiency and the number of miles on a bus. And in the moment of the pandemic, we realized we have to feed children and they're not coming to our buildings. And so we need to get food to children and a lot of food to children. And we have these big, huge fleets of buses. But we came face to face very quickly with a thick notebook of regulations around what a yellow bus could be used for and could not be used for. And to the credit of our State Department and those who do policy work at the state level here in North Carolina, and I'm sure around the country, to your point, we went back to what was most important, health and safety of our children, and really thinking about the whole child. And suddenly we're using yellow buses to deliver lunch to children so hungry children could eat, which would not have been allowable under those big piles of regulations had folks not cut through it very quickly. And so the pandemic absolutely opened opportunity for us to do what we may have always wanted to do, but we couldn't get out of our own way in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And Rob, my hope is post-pandemic, and I think there will be a post-pandemic. Some days I know it doesn't feel that way.
That's right.
I hope we don't think, okay, I'll go, it's over, now we can retreat to the past.
Right.
We got to think about the lessons we learned here and move to the future and not retreat to the past.
Absolutely. Well, and early on in our conversation, I referred to you appropriately, I think, as a futurist, and you kind of shared where that passion started and came from and continues in your life. And so in looking forward to this conversation, one of the things that I've most looked forward to is being able to ask you this question. We've alluded to it a couple of times. And so with all of your vast background and projecting forward, here we are in a pandemic that's ripped off a lot of Band-Aids and allowed us to see what's most important and what was in our way. What do you see as the future of education? What do we look like at our best in the future if we really take advantage of this opportunity? And what could we look like at our worst if we fail to take advantage of this opportunity?
The worst, I'll begin with the worst. We will retreat to the 20th century and prepare kids for the next grade, the next test, the next level of education, but not for the world beyond school. The best, I think we're facing, Rob, three kind of fundamental shifts. The first one is our 20th century system was designed around a standardized mass production system.
Yeah.
And so, all kids take the same courses for the same amount of time, and magically on one given day, we're going to give a test and they're all going to be in the same place.
Right.
All of us know that's absolutely crazy. But we had to do it because we were one teacher, 25 kids, the mass system. The advancing technologies, and in the pandemic, the one thing I worry a lot about that I don't think other people are worrying about is how fast artificial intelligence is accelerating and what that acceleration can do to move from a standardized education system to a personalized system. So let me give you an example. We all have cell phones.
Yes.
And smartphones. And you get up in the morning, if you got your smartphone on, You turn on your car, head to your office, Rob, it tells you how many minutes, it knows where you're going.
Exactly.
It knows how many minutes it's going to take you to get there. Okay? You're online and suddenly you get an ad, and the ad seems to be almost personalized to you. And how does it know that? That's artificial intelligence.
Right.
Okay? The algorithm tracks everything you're doing and is constantly learning more and more and more about you. And so again, simple examples is, your cell phone, you're shopping online, you're Googling online, the news feeds that pop up to you relate to something you have an interest in. What I think we're missing is what that's about to do to education.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of small startup companies in ed tech. On a mass basis, China is doing it at an incredible rate. And we're on a podcast, so I can't show you the videos, but I have unbelievable videos of showing what they're doing on this. In the United States, Holt Mifflin Harper, it's the largest publishing company, has just announced about a month ago they're moving to a tech company. And let me give you an example of what it can do. You got a kid who is struggling in reading, and the kid loves basketball. And I'm using this example because it is one of my grandkids. Okay, he's going to be an NBA basketball player when he grows up, and he's projected to be 5'6" when fully grown. Okay, all he wants to do is play basketball. He struggles. He legitimately struggles in reading, and I think he has a slight form of dyslexia, and that may be why. And so what do we do to a kid like that, Rob? We pull them out of the only courses they like, to double them up in what they don't like and hate. And we give them a bunch of stuff to read, and we work with them on reading. You know what he would read about? He'd read about anything on basketball.
Right.
If he struggles in math, have we ever recognized that sports is applied math and science?
Exactly.
And so where we're headed with instructional materials is this. And it relates to this whole, and online only accelerated it, with companies like Google investing literally hundreds of millions of dollars in developmental costs here. I go online, I'm going to read something. It tracks how long I stay on that site. It tracks how quickly I go through that site. It will therefore develop an algorithm of what do I like to read. Mm-hmm. It will measure my Lexile reading level. And the next time I go on, it will pick an article that it thinks out of millions of articles out there, something topic-wise and level-wise that relates to me personally. Okay? And it might even give some little videos and activities that the kid would have an interest in. So engages that child. That enables you to go to personalized learning. Think about how many parents in your school district would have loved to have that application as they were trying to teach their kid at home,
right?
Trying to work at home. That's and right. Having 3 kids and all the issues. Technology is fundamentally going to change our instructional program. The question is whether public schools are going to embrace that or whether they're going to fight it. Because with the iPhone, we fought it. Right. We won't let kids use this technology when they take the test because we think they might cheat. They might either go online and find the answer, or they might share the information with each other. 2 basic skills you need to be independent as an adult. We tried to force 21st century technology to conform to our 20th century schools, right, rather than transforming our 20th century schools into the realities of a technological information, artificial intelligence-based society that kids are going to work, live, and interact in. And so I think we're going to move to personalization rather than standardization. Right. But we're regulated, certified, tenured, and contracted around standardization.
Exactly.
Rob, I hope with every ounce of energy in my body, my next statement's not true. But I think we're very close to losing public education as we now know it. because we're beginning to look more and more and more like a museum, especially to these 21st century kids and parents. There are other issues that are going to pop up. That technology enables you to measure student growth. And so on an ongoing basis. So I'll use Lexile Quanta as an example. I can quickly determine what growth the kid is having. And maybe growth is more important than a one-time proficiency standard for every kid on the same day. We're holding some kids back with our proficiency model, and we're putting incredible obstacles in front of others. And the final one I would mention is the American Association of Directors of Human Resources did a survey now 3 weeks ago. Their projection is that 35% of all American workers will work from home permanently post-pandemic.
35%.
Therefore, should we be teaching our kids how to function in a remote environment? Because a third of them are going to spend their life in it. At a minimum, a third of them, their life in it. And therefore, should every kid on an ongoing basis have some, not total, but some remote experiences?
Right.
Or are we going to think pandemic is over, don't need to do remote anymore? I could give lots and lots of other examples, but I think this world is about to fundamentally and irreversibly change. I'm just worried, where is our schools going to go? Are they going to take the lead? Or are they going to fight it? And if they fight it, I think we're in deep trouble because parents and others won't put up with it.
Well, and I first of all, I want you to know that I'm absolutely 100% on board with what you're sharing. I remember many years back, one of the first times I heard you speak, you talked about what a smartphone would do. And the phone that I had at that time was not telling me where I was going or how long it would take me. And pretty quickly, my phone was telling me how long it would take me to get to work. And I remember thinking specifically of you one Sunday morning when I got in my car and it told me what time or how long it would take me to get to church.
And I knew it was Sunday. Yeah.
Knew it was Sunday, and it knew I was headed to church. And I thought, no, wait a minute.
Yep.
And I was thinking of Dr. Bill Daggett in that moment because you talked about that. And of course, there's so much there as well when we think about, for example, some of the negativity in our world because we tend to read what the algorithms bring to our information flow. And sometimes that can be dangerous if we're only reading things that keep us seeing and thinking in only one direction as opposed to more of a universal view. And I think that's going to be an issue that society has to tackle and really think widely about.
Yeah, Rob, I'd like to interject a thought on that for every
Please.
school leader. I do something every morning, not because I like to do it, because I try to remain healthy. I jog every morning 4 miles on a treadmill. And I spend half that time every morning listening to Fox News and the other half to one of the more liberal networks. And what I find is the gap between what they're reporting and saying is absolutely dramatic. And going back to what you just said about the algorithm, my fear is people either listen to one side or the other. And as a school administrator, you're going to get in deep trouble because if you think everybody thinks just like you do, at a minimum, a third, but probably closer to 48% of your population thinks differently.
Exactly.
And that's true of our classroom teachers as well.
That's right.
And our job is to help expose everything, give them the skills to think things through logically, not tell them what to think.
Absolutely. And encourage what you do, which is to try to look at the news, for example, from multiple perspectives. And I'm sure if nothing else, it probably drives the algorithm on Bill Daggett crazy. You're harder to predict because you're going left and right with equal vigor. And so certainly.
And I won't tell you what side of the aisle I'm on here, but when I'm off and I go upstairs and I talk to my wife, who has the same belief system as I do, and I tell her what the other side is saying, she don't even want to hear it. I don't even want to hear it. Don't even talk to me about it. But that is the problem we have as a country. We've become very polarized, and that's not good for our kids.
That's right. That's right. Dr. Daggett, in thinking about what you've shared in terms of what the future potentially is going to look like, what it will look like with this drive towards personalization, that worries me as someone who absolutely believes in public education from the standpoint of, in many ways, historically, it's been the great equalizer, or if not the equalizer, giving opportunity to children who may not come from very wealthy circumstances or who may come from really tough circumstances to prove themselves and pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And that may not be the great number we'd like it to be, but it's certainly been there. I worry that if those in the know or those of means begin to go a different direction, that what's left behind with public education won't be equipped to serve those children who are most at risk. And I wonder your thoughts around that. Am I just completely missing the picture there, or are there thoughts about what we can do to mitigate that, or what have you thought in that area?
Yeah. First of all, we'll never lose public education because there's a bunch of kids nobody else wants.
Well, there you go. There you go. Absolutely.
It's saying it a different way than what you just said. Right. And that's a polarization that would make this a nation I don't want to live in.
Right, that's right.
You cannot be left with only the most vulnerable and somewhere else have all the rest of the kids. That's why I think schools have got to be more aggressive about creating the culture and then embracing and bringing the technology in where appropriate. And also recognizing something we haven't talked about, Rob, and that is that for an individual to be independent and successful as an adult, what they're really going to have to be able to do is do what the technology can't do. And what the technology can't do are the non-cognitive skills. Okay? The whole soft skills, the whole, and when we think about it, every superintendent, every principal in this country recognizes over the last few years, we've had an increase in SEL mental health issues.
Yes.
Pre-pandemic, and they've only got worse in the pandemic. So when you think about those soft skills, respect, responsibility, trustworthiness, honesty, curiosity, creativity, innovation, when you begin to think about those skills, our kids are coming to us with greater deficits than ever before. But the world we're trying to prepare them for has a higher threshold in terms of need than ever before. Our biggest gap today is not the cognitive academic skills. It's the non-cognitive skills. It's the SEL type skills. And I think public education is the greatest place to teach those because you need to teach them for a diverse nation. And public ed has got all the kids. Right. And if we begin to segregate these kids out more and more, we're going backwards on the whole civil rights movement.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's one of those things that keeps me up at night, Dr. Daggett, because that's what I worry about. I worry about, as someone who myself was a first generation college student, loving parents loved me very much. They didn't know anything about entry into college. And so thankfully I had some amazing teachers in the public education system who saw something in me and pushed me, great counselors who helped me with the process. And consequently, each of my children wound up going to college. And so teachers turned around the trajectory, not just of an individual, but the trajectory of a family. Not that college is the end all be all, but it was an access to an opportunity that my family previously hadn't been able to access or hadn't selected to access, perhaps. I worry that opportunity may not exist if we're not careful, if we're not really listening to thinkers and leaders like you. And so you've been so very generous with your time, Dr. Daggett, but what I'd like to do is just ask you, so for our ed leaders who run the gamut from teachers to principals to superintendents and beyond in our country and beyond, I'm positive that this has really touched them in a deep way. What do they need to be reading? What do they need to be accessing? What do they need to be thinking in this moment to help grow their skill set around being future focused and really being ready to help make these big changes that public education absolutely needs to make for our children?
Yeah, they need to begin to read publications they typically don't read. There's a book just out called Aftershock, AFTERSHOCK, and it's by 50 futurists, where each of them does a short piece. It's the best single thing I've seen. The other thing they may want to pay attention to, Rob, is especially for the superintendents, if they're involved with AASA, they will hear this at the national conference in February. It'll be announced before then, but we'll give our first report. I'm about to co-chair a national commission for AASA in partnership with all the other major education groups in the country, with AASA as a lead group. And we're bringing together 12 to 15 of the most forward-thinking people in the country, leaders in the technology field, leaders in the education field, leaders from the foundation field, 12 to 15 of them, to look at what should American education look like in 2025 and beyond. And then we're going to put a panel of about 50 superintendents around them to actually look at the committee's recommendations, because really forward-focused people sometimes haven't got their feet solidly on the ground like a superintendent has to. So these superintendents will then react to every committee recommendation and in effect veto those that don't make sense. And then the third part of it is we're going to tie a series of demonstration districts around that will go out and try to actually implement the most cutting edge innovative practices to prepare all, and I put all in caps, kids for this changing world. I would say to school leaders, I think because of all the key players and groups we're going to have involved, probably be the most cutting edge thing out there for the next 2 to 3 years.
I'm so excited to hear you share that, and I'm looking forward to the work that'll come out of that process. And thank you for the book recommendation, Aftershock. For our listeners, on the podcast page, I will link information to the resources Dr. Daggett has shared, and also links to Dr. Daggett's books and his work as well. Dr. Daggett, I just again want to say thank you so much for your time. You've been so very kind, so very generous. And as I said at the outset, and I'm not saying it just because I'm in a conversation with you, I have shared it with many of the friends and colleagues we share in common. You are one of those thinkers who has pushed me as an educational leader, who's helped keep me out of the ditches on more than one occasion. And I certainly appreciate the work that you're doing, the difference you're making. Thank you for being there for so many of us, and thank you for pushing public education where we need to be going.
Thank you, Rob. And if anybody has some questions, I can help them in some way, let me know.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure we have your contact information on that webpage so that our listeners can get that as well. Dr. Daggett, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rob.
I hope that you enjoyed our time with Dr. Daggett today. He recently wrote a blog entry titled Trailblazers Wanted. In it, he wrote the following: I sincerely hope that you and your loved ones are healthy and safe and taking every precaution to stay that way. The unpredictable moments in our lives used to feel a bit more predictable, didn't they? Or perhaps just more familiar. And then instantly, the routines and schemas that have always defined normal life are upended. For those of us in education, our daily landscape is suddenly surreal terrain, as if the challenges we were already facing within the physical walls of our more ordinary school days weren't enough. And yet, we must forge a new path, despite our trepidations. So what will it be? Become trailblazers or lost in the woods? My friends, Dr. Bill Daggett is clearly a trailblazer. And you know what? You are too. Thank you for refusing to become lost in the woods. Thank you for blazing a new trail and ensuring that our students have all that they need to be successful despite this pandemic. Thank you for spending time with me today, and thank you for all that you do for every student, every teacher, and every staff member. You are making a difference. If no one else has told you, I want you to know that I believe in you. Good day.
Thank you for listening to the EdLeader podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and consider leaving a review with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts so that we may continue to grow the EdLeader community. We hope that you have enjoyed your time with Dr. Jackson. Until next time.